This episode is brought to you by North Texas Honda Dealers. North Texas Honda Dealers, they're here to help.
He has time, launches it to the end zone. Touchdown! Terrence Williams!
The throw goes to the right side for Crabtree. It's caught. He he's going hard down. Red Raider.
What's up the 10? What's he up the right sideline?
Yeah, he's got to go. He's tackled. Sam Houston wins it. The Bearcats capture their first FCS championship.
Hello and welcome back to the Republic of Football, our first Sunday recap edition of the 2022 college football season, and from El Paso. My name is Mallory Harley. I'm the associate producer here at Dave Campbell's Texas Football and Dave Campbell's Texan Live. On the call with me, it's our senior college football writer and insider, Mr. Mike Craven. Craven, thanks for recapping this long, crazy weekend with me, just right across the hotel.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. El Paso's been great. It's a great place to come visit. I'm glad that it was a week 0 game. We could kind of get out here and kind of cover anything and everything that we came across throughout the last couple of days.
Yeah, I think I said this to you last night. It feels like we have been doing a ton in just a small amount of time. Like we only came here, I guess we flew in Friday afternoon and it's only Sunday and it feels like we've been here for a full week just because we've been going nonstop, but it's all been great. This episode is going to be kind of short and sweet because we only had one college football game to talk about, the conclusion of week 0 of the season. We also went to a high school game Friday night, so we'll give you a little bit of insight into that game. And of course, in the back half, we ate some really good food here in El Paso. We had a great time, some experiences, so we'll give you a little bit of an insight to that. But since we are a college football podcast, let's go ahead and open up and talk about the game that we saw last night at the Sun Bowl. The North Texas Mean Green showed that they mean business with a big win, 31-13 over the UTEP Miners. And this game really wasn't originally on the schedule, but with Old Dominion, Southern Miss, and Marshall scheduled to leave at the end of the academic 2022 season, they kind of had to scramble to put this game together. So really, there really wasn't going to be a week 0 conference game for these two teams.
Yeah, it was kind of one that got thrust upon them when they had to readjust the schedule. I do think it's something that Conference USA likes. From talking to Dana Dimmel, from talking to a couple of people at Conference USA, I believe this is something that they'll look into doing year in and year out, get a Conference USA game in week 0. Just because it brings some eyes. There's something about having a conference game that early. There's not, a full slate of college games, so you can get some more attention than maybe you wouldn't in week 1. So I think overall good for the conference. They had a separate, there was another conference game going on too yesterday. And so I think it's kind of a formula, they accidentally stumbled upon and were like, hey, this can be good marketing for us. So it's something that will continue, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think so too. Let's go ahead and start off with North Texas. Essentially, this was a pretty big win for these guys, morally and on the field, off the field. They were able to showcase a pretty balanced offensive attack with 136 total yards on the ground and Austin Aune at quarterback throwing for 236 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. Like we talk about Austin Aune a lot, kind of what he brings, what he doesn't bring to the football field. He threw 9 touchdowns, 9 interceptions last year total. But if he could play UTEP every single year or every single game, he'd be a Conference USA first team all conference quarterback. In his career, he's played 24 games, I'm sorry, and he's thrown 26 touchdowns. 9 of them have been against UTEP, so he really likes UTEP. He's never thrown an interception in 3 games against UTEP. He's never been sacked in 3 games against UTEP. And so to me, walking out of that stadium last night, my biggest storyline was the North Texas offensive line. They averaged, 4 yards a carry. Some of that got skewed late in the game as they were just kind of running to run out the clock. But they averaged over 5 yards a carry in the first half. They didn't allow a sack. Austin Aune could do whatever he wanted. He had time. He had time to run around and buy time. And that Jake Roberts touchdown was a perfect illustration of that. They dominated UTEP's defensive line, a defensive line who we consider to be pretty good. So if you're UTEP, I don't think or if you're North Texas, there's not much bad to take from this game. You're able to run the ball and dominate the line of scrimmage on offense. You're able to do the same thing on defense as well. Phil Bennett's group didn't allow a point in the second half, stopped the big plays from UTEP. So just an overall absolutely great performance by North Texas, specifically in the second half where they outscored UTEP 17-0.
And I think if you're a North Texas fan, you can be really excited by the offensive stat line, by how balanced that offensive attack was. Because if you remember last year, it took them till about half that season to kind of figure out that they're more of their identity in their running game, right? You know, they tried to pass the ball a lot more with Aune, big explosive plays with him, but that just doesn't work for this team. And so once they figured that out last year, we all know what happened. They pretty much went one out in conference play, minus that last bowl game.
Yeah, that running game really helps Aune, right? Like you see yesterday, as that running game got going and they were just running up the gut, all of a sudden UTEP's putting 7, 8, 9 men sometimes in the box.
Mm-hmm.
And that leaves just one-on-one opportunities for the wide receivers, for the tight ends. And then it's just up to Aune to make the throw. And yesterday he made the throws. And if he can do that, you know, this UTEP team's not only, you know, going to be bowl eligible and get to 6 wins, you know, they could really start to surprise some people and be a real contender in Conference USA with plus quarterback play.
Mm-hmm. Let's switch sides over to the defense. It really took until the second half for this defense to kind of kick things into high gear. And yeah, it showed, not allowing a single point to be scored, and just really an impressive stat line throughout the whole game for this defensive unit.
Yeah, I mean, UTEP's a boomer bust offense. They want to push the ball downfield, and in the first half, they were able to do that. North Texas was challenging to do that. UTEP made some plays, and you can tell Phil Bennett just made the decision to play some high safeties, take away the big plays, and make UTEP earn their yards going down the field, and UTEP consistently couldn't do it. They were able to move the football. You know, they had 400 yards of offense for UTEP, you know, 1 yard more than North Texas did. But once they got into that, you know, 20, 30, you know, kind of the gold zone there, they couldn't get any further, right? Once the yardage shrunk up, their offense struggled. North Texas had that big 4th down stop on the goal line in the first half that really set a tone. Again, they took away big plays in the second half. You know, in the second half, UTEP passing game was 8 of 22 for 87 yards total. You know, so they just weren't able to do anything in the second half. The offense started scoring points, and then that made it to where UTEP had to kind of, you know, speed things up and pass the ball even more and more. And so just, you know, Phil Bennett's one of my favorite defensive coordinators in the state. When he came to Denton, he completely changed that unit. They're one of the best defensive units in this conference. And that's why I say, you know, when you add that running game combined with that defense, if Aune can be what he was last night, North Texas is a much, much better football team than we thought going into the season.
And I think if there's anything to frown upon with that defense last night, and of course a little bit is because it was week 0 of the season, it's just that discipline. I mean, there was one drive where there were 3, personal foul penalties right in a row. And I mean, of course, that has a lot to say just to it being week 0 and new guys being on the field and stuff like that. But that's free yardage for the Miners, you know, and luckily that drive for North Texas only ended on a field goal for UTEP, but it could have gotten a lot worse if they weren't able to hold them off. Let's go ahead and talk about UTEP just a little bit, since they are also a Texas team that we cover. They seem to have things figured out offensively in the first half. I think Gavin Hardison looked really good, throwing for 206 yards, 1 touchdown in the first half. But, man, that second half they were running the struggle bus offensively.
Yeah, I mean, not having Jacob Cowing, not having Justin Garrett, it was a big loss at wide receiver. But they had 2 wide receivers that caught for over 100 yards. So, you know, they were able to find plays, just not in the second half. It just got bad in the second half. And, you know, that completion percentage is concerning. He finished the game with 44% completion rate. He was around 63%, I believe, last year when he was playing well, right? So you got to get that up. There has to be – they just couldn't make any easy throws. It felt like it was a 40-yard pass down the field that somebody had to make a highlight reel catch for, or an incomplete pass. You know, there wasn't much in between. And so if you're not going to have a dominant run game, which UTEP just doesn't, their offensive line isn't good enough, right? Their offensive line isn't North Texas. They're experienced, but they're just not the same size. Like when we were on the field before the game, you know, one team was bigger than the other. Like one team had more size than the other, and it showed up. Like there's weight classes in boxing, right? Like Joey McGuire, one of our favorite guys, he always says big guys beat up on little guys, right? And I've been out to UTEP for 2 games in the last 10 months. One was against UTSA and one was against North Texas, and the same thing happened to that UTEP offense and the UTEP defense in both games. They just lost the trenches. Both of those, UTSA and North Texas, were better in the trenches against those teams. Until they can kind of catch up there, they're just not going to be able to stick with those physical, run-oriented offenses.
Right, and that kind of translates down to high school a little bit too, because you and I, we'll talk about a little bit more about this later, but we were at a high school game on Friday night, and yeah, I mean, even compared to guys you see in DFW, to guys you see in Houston, those offensive linemen, I mean, they're just smaller out here, Well, let's switch.
And we were watching a 6A versus 5A game.
Right.
And you could tell, like, the skill position guys weren't all that different.
Mm-hmm.
The offensive linemen and the defensive linemen were much different. Canutillo would have 3 or 4 of those guys. Pebble Hills would have 6 or 7. And
right.
It's the same. I think we saw the difference between an American program and a Conference USA program.
Mm-hmm.
UTEP has a couple guys. They got a couple good offensive linemen. They got a couple good defensive linemen. But North Texas has 2 or 3 more at both positions, and that adds up over a 60-minute football game. This was 14-13 at halftime.
Mm-hmm.
And then the size and the depth of North Texas really won out. UTEP got tired. They were missing Breon Hayward, a couple other guys defensively. They just weren't able to rotate. North Texas just keeps pounding and pounding and pounding that football. And UTEP eventually broke, and that's what you want for North Texas. And that's a concerning thing for UTEP. There was a sold-out Sun Bowl, all the momentum in the world. You won 7 games last year. The city wants to get behind you and really support this team. And then you lose 31-13. And I'm not one that likes to take too much from one game or be like, oh, this one game's so big to the program. But it is. It's going to be interesting to see what attendance is for UTEP moving forward after this game, because they had a real chance to capture this city and build momentum. And instead, they got outscored 17-0 in the second half. We'll see what that means in a couple weeks when they're back home against New Mexico State, if they can fill that Sun Bowl back up, or if this kind of serves as a reset and they kind of have to start back at square one and rebuild all that momentum all over again.
Right. And Miners fans, I don't have great news for you. Next week, you're traveling to Norman, Oklahoma to take on Brent Venable's squad and his Sooners. And of course, we don't really know what this Sooner squad is going to look like with Brent Venables and Gabriel. What's his last name?
Dylan Gabriel.
Dylan Gabriel at quarterback. We don't really know much about them, but we do know that they're typically a top 10 program year in and year out. So may not be some good news heading into that game next week. And of course, if they lose that game next week, they're 0-2 to start the season. They're coming back to the Sun Bowl to play New Mexico State that next week. And you don't know, I mean, that momentum just might be gone. And, that might be their season, because you're already starting off this season kind of with a bad taste in your mouth. You're being left out of, being invited to the American Conference. You're having to stay back in this carcass of a Conference USA. I mean, what can you expect from this season? If they're going 0-2 to start it off, I mean, what comes of this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think for them, you're trying to beat New Mexico State. You're trying to beat New Mexico. Then you're 2-2, kind of going into the teeth of conference play. You got a Boise State game as well that you're probably going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
So it really comes down to just trying to get to that 6-win marker. You're just trying to reach a bowl game. That would be a huge milestone for this program. They've only done that once this century, twice as a program or 3 times as a program in general. So, making that 6-win marker, I think, is still the carrot out there for UTEP. But the reality is that game last night cost them millions of dollars.
Yep.
And they're not a program that can lose millions of dollars, right? And so we'll have to see kind of what the long-term ramifications are for this game, because if they were a program that started drawing 30, 35, 40,000 people on a routine basis, all of a sudden that's more money in the program that really starts to add benefits a couple of years down the road. Without that, again, they're kind of back to square one and having to start all over again, kind of building that cachet within the city.
Right. And if you're UNT, you're coming out of this game high and mighty. I mean, you're going in, you're 1-0 in conference play, 1-0, of course, on this season, and you're going home next week to play one of your almost conference rivals SMU, and just like OU, we don't really know much about this SMU squad. They bring in a ton of transfers. Of course, new head coach Rhett Lashley. We'll see what he's capable of as coaching the SMU Mustangs. So, but if you're UNT, I mean, you're going into this game with a lot of momentum.
Yeah, a lot of momentum and a lot of hope, a lot of self-belief, right? You know, like this is a future conference mate you're playing against an SMU. You want to see how you measure up. So I think a lot like UTEP this week, where it was kind of a show me game. Let's see where you really are. This is a benchmarker game. We're about to find out if you have turned the corner as a program or not. We found out that UTEP hasn't. Next week, it's the same for North Texas. If they go and they lose 31-13 to SMU, it's like, well, okay, they beat UTEP. They're supposed to. That's a Conference USA team. Let's see how they do the rest of the year. If they hang with SMU and make that a really good game or somehow win that game, all of a sudden it's like, wow, okay, something's happening in North Texas. Right? So, perception can change so quickly in college football. And this is just another example, right? We're down on North Texas going into the year. We're high on UTEP. You know, one day later, we're talking about North Texas having a chance to beat SMU, and is UTEP going to get to 6 wins, right? So it all is on a dime, especially early on the year. I don't want to overreact too much to this week 0 game. I'd like to see North Texas play SMU before we kind of decide if North Texas is really taking a step forward, if Austin Aune is really a guy we can count on. Because again, like we talked about earlier, he always plays good against UTEP. So maybe this is just a UTEP thing. Let's wait and see, you know, the rest of it before we start anointing North Texas as an 8-win, 9-win team.
Again, North Texas beats UTEP at the Sun Bowl 31-13. And before we move on, we had the pleasure of catching up with North Texas quarterback Austin Aune and linebacker Katie Davis after last night's win over UTEP. Here's our conversation with both of those players.
Here with North Texas quarterback Austin Aune after a big win over UTEP 31-13. What's it about UTEP and that defense that you like playing against? 9 touchdowns, no interceptions in your career so far.
I think that's just, you know, coaches having a good game plan and then going out there and executing. So that's, you know, 11 guys for us on offense doing their job. And I think we did a pretty good job executing the game plan today, but I feel like we left some plays out there. So, you know, we'll go back and watch the film and clean up our mistakes.
As a quarterback specifically, like in the first game, how long does it take to kind of like shake off the practice stuff and kind of get used to the game speed again?
Yeah, obviously, you know, not getting hit, that's probably the biggest thing. But once you get hit and get in a rhythm, you just kind of get into a flow state, and you know, you get some completions, and you know, everything kind of starts to roll smoothly. So I feel like I kind of got that early in the game today. So that was a big thing for me.
You know, you go through a quarterback battle, you know, through spring and through fall. Some new guys come in. What was it like to get that job again? And kind of was there pressure? Kind of how do you feel about that going into the season?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're battling for our job each and every day. So, you know, going through the spring, summer, and fall camp, you know, I battled out with some great quarterbacks. And, you know, really you just got to execute the game plan to the best of your abilities. Can't look over your back. Just take it one play at a time, you know, execute each play and then win.
You know, offensive line, running game, really good at North Texas, obviously, last year, again today. How much does that help you as a quarterback to have that balance?
That's awesome. Having a running game is huge for an offense. You know, they're going to load the box and play one-on-one with us on the outside. So, you know, we got to take advantage of the shots, and I think we did a pretty good job of that tonight. But our run game is very strong for us, and we got great running backs and great offensive line. They did a great job tonight.
Yeah, you play against that Phil Bennett defense all the time. You know, they didn't give up a single point in the second half. What makes them so tough as a unit?
Man, the kind of different looks they give you, the pressures they give you, you know, Coach Bennett is a great coach. You know, giving you different looks, pressure looks, and it was fun going against them all camp. But it's definitely fun to not see his defense anymore and going and hitting heads with somebody else. So it was great to get out and play UTEP.
You know, week 0, it's a conference game. You get a win. How much does that help the program in terms of momentum and just kind of getting it into the 2022 season?
Yeah, starting off the year with a conference play is huge for us. So starting 1-0 was big. You know, our thing is, you know, going 1-0 each week, no matter if it's conference or non-conference. But being conference, a little bit more on the line, starting off the year on the right foot. So I think we did a great job tonight going 1-0, and so we'll celebrate this one. Get back at Denton tomorrow, celebrate, and then on to SMU.
All right, man. Congratulations. Be safe on the travels.
Appreciate it.
Here with Katie Davis, linebacker, North Texas. Big win over UTEP in El Paso, 31-13. How good does it feel to kind of get that first one out of the way, kind of see the guys, on the field against other people for the first time?
Oh yeah, it's always a great feeling, coming out and getting the first win. Just let everybody else on the schedule know how you coming. It's a great feeling, just doing what we're supposed to do and come out and putting it on the field. It means a lot. It's a great feeling.
Not all the time do you start a season with a conference game. How much did that help in preparation, kind of lock in and focus for the season?
Oh yeah, it was crucial. We had to lock in. We couldn't take no days off. We couldn't have no setbacks. It's a conference game, so we want to set the tone for the rest of the conference and just show what we can do.
Y'all were pretty physical, out-physicaled them. Like, how important was that coming in here? Big crowd, kind of, shutting them down offensively.
Oh, yeah, it was, like I said, it was crucial. UTEP, they pride themselves on being very physical, and that's what their head coach pride themselves on. So, it was good to come out and handle business.
For a first game, like, how many plays does it take to be like, oh, okay, this is football again?
No lie, like we was at dinner and I couldn't believe it. I was talking to some of the linebackers, I couldn't believe it. But when I got on the field, when I heard that whistle blow, man, it was a great feeling, and I was ready to go.
And then as a defensive guy, how nice is it to watch the offense, see them score points, and just play complimentary football?
Oh yeah, everything ain't always perfect. We'll give up a play, offensive go, they'll score a touchdown, they'll make a mistake, and we'll go out there and we'll shut them down. So it's always good to feed off each other.
All right, man, appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thanks again to North Texas quarterback Austin Aune and linebacker Katie Davis for talking to us after that big win over UTEP last night. Well, college is not the only thing that we cover here. We also cover high school football, and we made it out to a high school football game on Friday night. We got to see the Canutillo Eagles host the El Paso Pebble Hills Spartans, and man, going into this game, I had a completely different expectation for how this game was going to go. I'll just read you guys the final score. It was El Paso Pebble Hills 23, Canutillo 0. Now, there's a little bit of mix match in classifications here. Pebble Hills is, of course, 6A and Canutillo 5A, which says a lot about the size and the depth about each program. But Canutillo, I think, overall had the best player on the field in athlete LJ Martin. And the craziest thing is that he showed a lot of versatility last night. Friday night, he lined up at running back, quarterback, wide receiver, and punter. Like this guy is clear that he's an athlete. He's committed to Stanford. He's really smart. He's really fast, but this Pebble Hills front seven just completely shut him down. And in high school, it's really hard to get those specific stats, but I would say that he probably had under 50 rushing yards last night, and I'm sure he is not used to that.
Yeah, I mean, he had 16 on his first carry, and I don't think he had another carry that was over 5 yards, probably.
No.
He had a tough time, and it did kind of look like he messed up his leg a little bit on an early carry. He got tackled in a weird way, and you could see him kind of nurse that and pay attention to it throughout the game. So I doubt he was 100% healthy as that went along, but he just could never take enough steps to get momentum to get down. He looks like a running back that once he gets north-south, he's hard to bring down. He's a big dude. He's a strong dude, especially for out here. He looked like one of the bigger guys on the field, offensive line, defensive line, running back, whatever. He was one of the bigger, more put together guys. So he just couldn't get north to south. Credit to Pebble Hills. They shot gaps. They really made it to where he had to avoid the tackles in the backfield. He couldn't get momentum and then gang tackled them, right? And so we talk about it on Republican football all the time. A great running back's awesome, but you got to have an offensive line to go along with it. If you can dominate in the trenches, you can have Barry Sanders back there. Maybe Barry Sanders is the wrong example, but you can have most running backs back there, and it doesn't really matter if you can't block for them. I was supremely impressed with Pebble Hills in both trenches. We'll see what they're able to do throughout the year because, I would imagine, they're pretty clearing away the best team in El Paso after Friday night. They were impressive. That was a good team.
I think so too. And one of the standouts that I saw on that Pebble Hills front seven was linebacker Bobby Deal. We actually talked about the El Paso region on Thursday's episode of Women Talking Football, and he was one of the players. What?
Plug.
Hey, I gotta throw it in there whenever I can. I gotta throw it in there. You make me lose my train of thought. Yeah, we got to talk about Bobby Dale, and I knew this was going to be a really interesting matchup for him and LJ Martin, because we also talked about LJ Martin, of course, too. So I knew that this was going to be really interesting, these two go at it. And there were a couple times where, yeah, like Bobby Dale would get in the backfield and cause LJ Martin to lose his footing or whatever, and he looked fantastic. But when you look at Pebble Hill's next couple of games, they've got Del Val, Eastwood, El Dorado, Coronado, El Paso Americas. And when you go down the list, I mean, it looks like that they could potentially go undefeated this year. I mean, if they can beat a really good Canutillo team, Canutillo is ranked number 21, I think, in our DCTF poll. Of course, now it's probably going to change since their loss on Friday, but it looks like this team could go undefeated, and they'd have to, of course, that first round would be a little difficult because they got to travel kind of far to play a more closer to DFW team. But it looks like that they could have a really, really good season if they keep up what they did on Friday night. So there you go. There is our high school recap of the week. We're going to go to another high school game next week. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Most importantly, probably, is we want to talk about some of the food that we ate on our El Paso trip. I think, honestly, this is probably the most important part of the whole entire trip. I mean, we're out in El Paso. We're getting some good, authentic Mexican food. Let's start off with Friday morning. You had breakfast. You got here before I did. I landed about probably 11:30. You landed about 8 from Austin. Where'd you eat for breakfast?
Yeah, so I usually, if I get here early, I'm going to Lucy's. It's a coffee shop. It's just one of those old school diners. It's like underneath a broken down hotel, basically. It's just got one line of rows. You just sit up at the diner, or whatever. You put your order in. They make it right in front of you. It's not healthy. It's greasy. It'll hurt your stomach, but it's delicious.
It'll hurt your stomach. Yeah.
That was my first stop. We kind of joke about this, but football season is where you gain 10 or 15 pounds.
Oh yeah.
It's like being a freshman in college. You're going to gain the football 15 because you're just on the road so much. You're eating poorly. You're not getting out of games until midnight, and like what's open that's healthy for you at midnight? Nothing. But it's nice to come to a place like El Paso where there's like a legit culinary scene. Like you can't find this stuff in most other parts of Texas. This isn't Tex-Mex. This is Mexican food, And so it's really good. We had Taco Neta for lunch. That's kind of a new place that Adrian brought us from the ESPN El Paso told us about. Yeah. And I think the star of the show, and we get your thoughts on it since you're an El Paso first timer here. Mm-hmm. L&J Cafe. I know it can be a little bit touristy, trappy. I know that's like where everybody gets sent and stuff, but it's just such a staple. It's such a cool part of town. It's a cool building in this random little neighborhood next to this old school cemetery. Kind of what were your thoughts on L&J compared to Mexican food back in DFW?
Man, if you guys know me, I'm a DFW native. I grew up in Arlington, lived there my whole life. So the quality of Mexican food there it's subpar, to say the least. It's Tex-Mex. It's not good Tex-Mex. So being out here, it was some good Mexican food. I got the sampler plate at L&J's. So I got a little bit of everything. I had some tacos. I had a quesadilla. Man, I can't even remember what else was on that plate, but there was so much on that plate. I couldn't even finish it all. I had to bring it back so I could eat some of it last night. But man, that was some of the best Mexican food I think I've had. And I would definitely recommend that place to literally anybody else that were to come here. It was really good.
Yeah, I mean, we walked in and the North Texas AD's there, all that kind of stuff's there. So it was a hopping place. And I just think El Paso's just an underrated, unique city in Texas that doesn't get talked about enough. Like when we talk about cool places in Texas, it just is never on the list. And it's such an awesome place. Like we drove an hour and a half to White Sands National Park, yesterday morning. There's mountains, there's, just all sorts of cool stuff here. The city's really safe. Like the crime rate's 1.53 times lower than it is in the rest of the state and the rest of the country. So it's just one of those places that I know it's hard to get to because it's like El Paso, but if you ever get a chance to get out here or drive through it or whatever, it's a tremendous place with great people, not a lot of traffic. The food's excellent. And there's a decent amount of stuff to do. So I always enjoy our trips out here. I'm glad somebody else was able to come out here with me. And
Yeah.
Usually I'm on these things alone and it kind of gets a little weird and hermity. So it was nice to have a road dog.
I think the White Sands National Park was really cool. And it's weird. So we left about like 8 yesterday morning thinking like, oh yeah, we're going to spend like 3 hours there. We're going to go on like hikes and stuff, like through the little dunes and whatnot. And then you get there and it's like, you see it, there's sand, and then there's more sand. And then you look to your other left and there's more sand. So it's like, why do you want to take a 5-mile hike through sand, basically? So in August, it was so hot out there already, but I mean, it wasn't as hot as like DFW, but it's still like that sun beating down and there's no shade either. Yeah, so you're stuck. Yeah.
There's no shade in El Paso, no shade at White Sands National Park. You just kind of think there's going to be water, like every time you see it, like, oh, we're on a beach, there's water. And there was not, that was the first time I was legit in like a desert, like you're in like the Sahara Desert or something, walking around like in a movie set or something. So yeah, it was pretty cool. I think we did a great job on this trip. Got a lot of content, ate a lot of good food, but it's time to go back home.
I know. And before we get going here, we did do a really cool thing. We got to be a guest on 600 ESPN El Paso. Adrian Broadus was able to bring us on, and we got to talk with, I'm going to butcher his last name, Steve. Let's call him Steve K. Steve K. I knew I was going to butcher that. I'm awful at names anyway. And I saw that. I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to say it. But yeah, big thank you to both of them for bringing us on. We got to talk a little bit about what we do here at Dave Campbell's Texas Football, why we're in El Paso. We got to preview the UNT and UTEP game a little bit. So I believe you can still go back and listen to that if you ever so desire. If you just have that craving to hear us on ESPN El Paso radio, I believe you can still go back and listen to that. But yeah, big thank you to them for having us on before that.
It threw me off because I thought we were going to just talk about UTEP North Texas, and they wanted to talk about than us and stuff, and so I like stumbled over everything because I was ready to break down the game, but in hindsight I'm glad I didn't, because I would have been wrong.
I know, right?
It was probably good that they saved me from that.
Yeah, he's like he like opens up, he's like, so now you've been out of college for 1 year. And I'm like, oh, so we're talking about ourselves now. Okay, I think I can do this. Let's give this a try. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Big thank you to them for inviting us to see their studio and hang out with them for a bit. Well, guys, there you go. There's our first Sunday recap edition of the 2022 season from El Paso. Again, I know it's pretty short, but we didn't have that much content. We only had one college, one high school game that we went to. Next week, it'll be a lot longer when we really get into the nitty-gritty of college football season. But man, I'm exhausted. I'm ready to go back to DFW.
Yeah, I got to fly to Austin and then drive to DFW.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's here, man. Like we made it.
Here.
It's week 0 was a nice little appetizer with the one game at the FBS level across the state. Next week we got I think 11 because SMU and North Texas play. Well, I guess 10 because UTSA and Houston also play each other.
Right.
So, it's going to be a full slate, a lot of good games. We'll be in San Antonio for the Houston UTSA game. We're going to go to Converse Judson versus Westlake the night before.
Yes.
So we're off and running, man. Follow us, everywhere. We're doing TikToks, we're doing Instagrams, we're doing Twitters, we're doing these shows, writing stuff. Like we're covering all the bases to see what sticks.
Yeah, it's funny. We were standing on the sidelines last night right before kickoff, and right when North Texas did kick off, you turn to me and you go, "Here we go. It's here. No more off season. This is what we're here for. This is it." Well, thank you so much to Canutillo High School, UTEP, Austin Aune, and Katie Davis for making this weekend really special for us. For Mike Craven, I'm Mallory Hartley. And of course, we've had 11 of the 12 FBS head coaches join us on the Republic of Football. Jimbo Fisher, give us a call. We'll see you Wednesday for our week 1 preview of the Republic of Football.